One of the greatest engineering feats of all time belongs to the ancient Roman Empire. Ancient Roman Empire, needing water in some of the lowland areas in the Italian peninsula, created one of the most extensive systems of aqueducts we've ever seen. Some of them actually still even stand today. They're really absolutely marvels of architecture and engineering. But these aqueducts had a very important purpose in the Roman Empire. You see, not only for the fun things like the Roman baths and the fountains in the cities, but even for agriculture and for mining, there was a need for a constant and uninterrupted flow of water. They couldn't just rely on the few moments of rain when they were able to gather some up, because in the summer there often wouldn't be enough to sustain the farming communities. So they created this system of aqueducts that they could pull water using nothing but gravity from the upper lakes and rivers of the mountainous regions and bring it down into the valleys where it was needed the most. And because of this invention, not even invention, they just made it bigger. But because they did this, because they were able to bring this constant flow of water into the Roman cities, Rome began to flourish. They were able to become the empire that we now know today, that extended throughout so much of the known world in its time. All because they were able to connect themselves constantly to this life-giving source of water. The Christian life demands a lot of us, if we're honest about it. It asks us constantly to live a life of charity, of giving of ourselves to others, even in moments when charity itself is difficult, sometimes even very costly. And the Christian life inspires us to live a life of virtue, even in the face of a culture that looks at virtue as kind of backwards and even inhibiting of the human spirit. And we're invited all the time to live a life of self-sacrifice, of self-denial, even in the midst of a world that advocates self-promotion above all else. But if we're going to live this life, if we are going to live this life that demands us to give so much, and if we're going to learn how to give constantly without becoming bitter, without becoming disillusioned, then perhaps even paradoxically, what we have to learn how to do is to receive. I have to learn how to receive so that I can learn how best to give. But receiving may very well be, in fact, the hardest thing of all. Because as costly as it is sometimes, it's also pretty easy to give. It's pretty easy to make myself available, to make myself indispensable to someone else, to do things for others. But it's a lot harder to put myself in a position where I need someone else to do something for me. It's a lot harder to allow that in my life because it requires two things that don't come very naturally to us humans: humility and trust. Humility because I have to acknowledge the fact that there's something that maybe I can't do for myself, that I need the help of someone else. And trust because I have to be open to the presence of someone else in my life and have confidence that they're going to be able to provide me with what I need. These don't come very naturally or spontaneously to us because we're told constantly that whatever we need, we can do it ourselves. So we struggle when we come up against those limits. And if we're really honest, a lot of times other people let us down. So we learn that sometimes it's easier to kind of struggle along without trusting anyone else, because at least then I won't be so terribly disappointed. But when I learn to receive from God, when I learn to let Him be the one who showers riches on me in the midst of my poverty, well, then humility and trust, in fact, become fountains that can bear great fruit. Because in humility, as I come to reconcile my own weaknesses, as I come to understand my own limitations, I also learn to look beyond them, to look into the realm of what's possible, not by my own actions, but by the actions of God, without whom I can do nothing, but with whom and in whose strength I can do, in fact, all things. And for trust, Jesus takes this beautiful image, He takes this commandment of the gospel, to remain in Him, to remain closely, intimately united with Him. He takes that commandment and He turns it into a promise. There is no uncertainty here. There is no maybe or possibly. Jesus is very definitive. He knows what the Father has in mind, and so He says, if you remain close to me, if you allow me to remain close to you, you will bear fruit. There is no question about it. If you allow yourself to be filled with my grace and my love, it will bear fruit in your life. There is absolutely no question about it. And so if we learn to receive everything from God, we learn to give the best of ourselves to others. We need to be constantly united to this channel of grace, to the channel of grace that comes to us in prayer, in our constant conversation with God, in our constant living in the gaze of His presence, and through the channels of the sacraments, especially the Eucharist, where Jesus comes so close to us, body, blood, soul, and divinity, that He inspires us to greater charity just by simply being with us. And so our Christian lives, especially our spiritual life, becomes far less about what we do and far more about what we allow to be done to us according to God's word. When we allow ourselves to be filled with God's love and mercy, then we become the very instruments that bring that love and mercy into a world that is so in need of it all. Now, the Roman aqueducts, as incredible and impressive as they were, had one fatal flaw, which is that they were exposed. And so during the decline of the Roman Empire, these other civilizations that were coming to attack them realized that one of the most effective things they could do was to destroy the aqueducts, to cut the cities off from their source of water. And in the cities that had their aqueducts destroyed, the cities and the peoples that were left found themselves greatly reduced and impoverished. And so it is for us. If we cut ourselves off from the source of grace and life, who is Jesus Christ, present in His church, present in the sacraments, then we find ourselves reduced and impoverished. But if we stay close, if we allow His grace and His life to flow through us into the world, we bear great fruit.